Welcome students. Welcome students. Today we shall be studying chapter 5 of Flamingo, Indigo. It is written by Louis Fisher. Now, Louis Fisher was a Britisher. He met Gandhiji in 1942 when Gandhiji narrated him all the incident and he recorded it. And he has written a book on Gandhiji, The Life of Mahatma Gandhi. It's an excerpt from the life of Mahatma Gandhi, this chapter. What does it give? It gives a first-hand account of Britishers' high-handedness, their oppressive policies towards Indians, and this chapter also tells us about the methods and practices of Gandhi's activism. Now, in this chapter, we are told that Gandhiji narrated how he urged the Britishers to leave India. He says that it was December 1916 when a farmer, a very poor farmer, came to meet him at Lucknow, where he was attending the Indian National Congress convention. He wanted that Gandhiji should come accompany him to Champaran to see for himself how the indigo sharecroppers were being treated by the Britishers. First of all, Gandhiji didn't knew where Champaran existed. Secondly, he said that he had prior appointments and therefore he cannot go to Champaran with him. But Rajkumar was, though he was illiterate, but he was very resolute. He followed Gandhiji wherever he went for weeks on end and would urge him to fix a date. Ultimately, noticing the persistence of Rajkumar, Gandhiji decided to visit Champaran with him. En route, they stayed at the house of Dr. Radhakrishnan. At that time, he was not there in the house. For the night, they stayed there. But Rajkumar couldn't tell him, because he was illiterate, he couldn't tell him the whole story of what he wants him to do. So Gandhiji and Root at Muzaffarpur met J.B. Kriplani and got the feedback in what was the condition of indigo sharecroppers. After arriving at Champaran also, he collected all the facts, and the facts were that arable land, most of it in Champaran, was under the control of Britishers. They were the landlords, landowners, and the Indians were their tenants. And the main crop was indigo, and they were forced to pay rent by way of 15% of the produce of indigo. The British landlords had come to know that synthetic indigo had been produced in Germany, and that therefore natural indigo was not required at all. It won't fetch that much price, and there will be no demand for it. But they somehow, in order to fleece the farmers, they said that okay, we will release you from giving us the rent, but instead you pay us the compensation. So willy-nilly, some of them agreed to. They had no other option, but most of them refused to enter into an agreement. So this was these were the developments that had taken place when Gandhiji arrived at Champaran. Now, armed with all these facts, Gandhiji approached all the British authorities, convincing them that the sharecroppers, indigo sharecroppers, had been deceived by the British landlords. But the British authorities were in no mood to listen to Gandhiji's opinion, and instead they directed him to leave Champaran. Gandhiji refused to do so. He was to go to Motihari to see the condition of a farmer. On the way, he was stopped from going to Motihari, driven back to Champaran, and served with a notice. Gandhiji received the notice, but put a remark that he defied those orders. Now, since he was defying the orders of the police, Deputy Superintendent of Police, so he was summoned to appear before the court. When the day he was to appear before the court, it is said that there was a multitude of farmers surrounding that court. The Britishers were baffled. They sensed that there may be mass unrest. So they told Gandhiji that the trial has been postponed. But Gandhiji said that he pleads guilty. Now the magistrate was duty bound to sentence him, whatever the sentence is, because he has accepted the charge of defiance. But after 2 hours of thinking, the magistrate said that he would deliver the order in a few days, and during that period, Gandhiji was free to go. Now, the matter reached Lieutenant Governor, who sent a message that the case has been dropped and requested him to meet him. Now this was, Gandhiji says that it was a triumph of civil disobedience. First instance of civil disobedience where he has succeeded. When he met Lieutenant Governor, there were protracted interviews, meetings with him, and ultimately the Lieutenant Governor constituted a commission of inquiry to look into this matter of indigo farmers. Gandhiji was to represent the farmers. In the face of clinching evidence that was produced before the British authorities and the British landowners, they had no other option but to agree in principle that they were wrong. The next question was how much they have to pay. They were thinking that Gandhiji would ask for full compensation, for full recovery of whatever has been paid, whatever has been received illegally by the British landowners. The matter went on, and there was no settlement in sight. But then ultimately the landowners put forward their proposal that they are ready to pay 25% of the illegal money that they had collected. Gandhiji agreed to it. Later he said that the amount was insignificant. It was not the money. It was the prestige that the Britishers lost. On the other hand, the peasants came to know what are their rights and who are their defenders. They got courage. Gandhiji says that he didn't leave the matters there. He had earlier planned to visit Champaran for a few days and settle a matter there, but he stayed for a year on end and saw the ground reality of how the Indian peasants were living their lives. He immediately decided how the children there should be educated, new schools should be opened, and how their health standards could be improved. Gandhiji says that this episode was a turning point in his life. On the one hand, he learned that his idea of civil disobedience can be put into practice, and that the Indians can get sufficient strength to get themselves free from the British rule. So it was in a nutshell. It is said that Champaran is the place where civil disobedience movement started at first. This is I have taken my own notes. This is not an ideal note. I had just put in some points of what to refer. So, students, I have given you the summary. Please go through the chapter. It's very easy. I'll make it easier. See, urge means request, persuade. Gandhiji, how he urged the Britishers to leave India. How he requested, how he persuaded. Then comes recounted. Recounted means narrated. He recounted these events to Louis Fisher, all those incidents, that civil disobedience movement in India started in 1917. Third comes emaciated, thin or feeble. Who was emaciated? Rajkumar, the farmer who came to meet Gandhiji at Lucknow, was an emaciated peasant, thin or feeble. It was also said that he was illiterate. Next, resolute means determined. Resolute means determined. Gandhiji saw the resolve that he had. He found that Rajkumar was illiterate but resolute. Resolute here means determined. Next, he was committed, dedicated. Tenacity, persistence. There was tenacity. All these things show determined, resolute, committed, tenacity. And he would pester Gandhiji, trouble him by asking again and again, please fix the date. Pestered. Pestered means to give trouble by asking questions again and again. En route. En route means on the way. En route, while they were going towards Champaran, for one night they stayed at en route. They stayed at our first president's name, at his house at Patna. Okay. Then harbor, given shelter to. Harbor means given shelter to. This comes that to understand the whole matter, because Rajkumar was not able to tell him the full facts. So in order to gather the facts, he met J.B. Kriplani. He was a professor in a government college, and Gandhiji stayed at his home, and he remarks that anybody else, if you would have harbored such a leader, that he would have been imprisoned, but J.B. Kriplani was not afraid of it. Next comes Advent, arrival. The Champaran people became very enthusiastic on the advent of Gandhiji. Advent means arrival of Gandhiji. Chided, criticized. Chided means criticized. When all the lawyers and other persons came to meet Gandhiji, and they said that they were representing these farmers in the court and were charging so much fees, Gandhiji chided them, criticized them. Then comes surrender, means give up. Irksome means annoying or irritating. Somebody's behavior is, he says that his behavior is irksome. You are annoyed at it. You are irritated. Multitude means extremely large number of people. So, how many people? Multitude of people came to visit Champaran. Extremely large number. Multitude. Spontaneous, done without planning. Now, it was all by word of mouth. The people were thronging that place, and it was all spontaneous. Spontaneous means done without planning. There was no planning in it. Regulate means control. Dreaded means feared. The Indians dreaded the Britishers. They were poor, illiterate, and they didn't know what their rights were. Disregarded means ignored. Furnish means provide. Reconvened, met again after a break. Yes, this episode comes that Gandhiji had defied the orders of Deputy Superintendent of Police, that he would not go out of Champaran. He was summoned to appear before the court. The magistrate was the court of magistrates. They were all baffled to see a multitude of people. They had come from far away, and they wanted to see who is this person from outside who has come to help them. So this much happened. Then they were trying to postpone the trial, but what happened? Gandhiji pleaded guilty and said that he should be given awarded sentence. Now the magistrate was in fix. He said that the court would reconvene after 2 hours. So reconvene here means reconvened. We met again after a break. When it reconvened, the magistrate said that he will deliver the orders in a few days, and till that period, Gandhiji was at liberty, was free to roam. Upshot means outcome, conclusion. Something has happened, and what its conclusion is. Desertion means abandonment. Triumph means became victorious. Now, when the matter came to Lieutenant Governor that he had pleaded guilty and he was not leaving Champaran at all, and there was mass unrest was there at that when Gandhiji was summoned. All this information was given to the Lieutenant Governor, who conveyed Gandhiji that his case against him has been dropped. Now it is said that triumphed, became victorious. Civil disobedience, Gandhiji says, civil disobedience triumphed in India for the first time. Triumph means became victorious. Vehement, forceful, means that they were collecting evidence vehemently. Vehement means forcefully. Prolonged, protracted. Protracted means prolonged. Protected. For based on it. There were 4 interviews with the Lieutenant Governor, and ultimately the Lieutenant Governor had no option but to constitute a commission of inquiry, where Gandhiji was to represent the peasants. Entreaty means request. Deceitfully means dishonestly. Now, there was clinching evidence there that the farmers had been deceit. Money had been extorted from them. When they knew that natural indigo will fetch no price and there was no demand for it, since Germany had developed synthetic indigo. So this deceitfully means dishonestly was shown that Gandhiji told the association, British Landowners Association, that you have deceit, okay? Dishonestly taken compensation from them, which was not due to them. Okay? Adamant, determined. Now, the Britishers agreed in principle that they were wrong. But how much money they have to pay back? So, Gandhiji was adamant, means Gandhiji was determined not to change his mind. He said that 50%, no less than that. At least, you have taken 100%, but at least give back 50% of what you have illegally earned. You have not earned it, illegally extorted. So, a settlement was reached, 25% was agreed upon. Gandhiji said that money didn't matter. It was the pride of Britishers which has been hurt, which has been injured. So, and he says that it was a turning point in his life. But seeing the conditions of the peasants, he had come to visit Champaran for a few days, but he stayed on there for a year on end and saw that the conditions there were, what they were? Were filthy, dirty. Conditions were filthy. How to alleviate, how to lessen their distress, how to lessen their hardships. Now this was the mission that he went on, and he opened various schools, and there were health centers were created. And I want to share one or two things here, that the refund was less important than the fact that the landlords had been obliged to surrender part of the money and with it part of their prestige. This is one thing. On the other hand, what the peasants had gained, he says, now the peasant saw that he had rights and defenders. For the first time, he came to know that he had certain rights. And there were people who will come to defend him, defend those rights. He learned courage. This was the achievement. He learned courage. Next, he says here, this is very important, how it was a turning point. What I did, he explained, was a very ordinary thing. I declared the British could not order me about in my own country. But Champaran didn't begin as an act of defiance. It grew out of an attempt to alleviate the distress of large numbers of poor peasants. This was the typical Gandhi pattern. The Gandhi activism in saying that. His politics was intertwined with the practical, day-to-day problems of the millions. His was not a loyalty to abstractions, liberty, fraternity, equality. No. His was not a loyalty to abstractions. It was a loyalty to living human beings. So, if you keep these meanings in mind, you will enjoy to read this lesson. Students, question is, why is Rajkumar Shukla described as being resolute? Rajkumar Shukla was a poor peasant from Champaran. He met Gandhiji at Lucknow when there was a convention of Indian National Congress. This happened in December 1916. He requested Gandhiji to accompany him to Champaran to see the plight of indigo sharecroppers. But Gandhiji expressed his inability to accede to his request due to prior commitments, prior appointments were there. But Rajkumar didn't lose heart. He followed Gandhiji for weeks on end. Wherever Gandhiji went, he would go there, followed him. Noticing his persistence, Gandhiji relented and decided to go to Champaran with him. Thus, Rajkumar succeeded in bringing around Gandhiji to visit Champaran. This is the first question. You can improve upon it. It's just a hint for you and how this question should be answered. Next is, what did the peasants pay the British landlords as rent? Why did the British planters now want instead, and why? What would be the impact of synthetic indigo on the prices of natural indigo? You know, synthetic indigo means indigo produced in the factory. It was not naturally grown now. So Indian farmers were growing it naturally in the field, but Germany had developed synthetic indigo. The indigo sharecroppers were compelled to give 15% of their produce as rent to the British landowners. Because arable land was there in the hands of Britishers, and the Britishers had to give indigo to England for cleaning the product, the cloth, etc. There was industrialization had taken place in England. So indigo croppers were compelled to give 15% of the produce of indigo as rent to the British landowners. Later, when the Britishers came to know that there was no demand for natural indigo as Germany had developed synthetic indigo at cheaper rates, the British landowners began extorting money by saying that to release the peasants from paying rent, these peasants should pay them compensation. So the demand of the landowners was illegal, and they had deceived the poor illiterate farmers because they didn't know that Germany had developed synthetic indigo. Now students, a question arises, why did Gandhi agree to the planters' offer of 25% refund to the farmers? Well, there was so much evidence available that they had fleeced Indians. They have dishonestly and misappropriated the compensation money. They had cheated them, but still, while negotiating with the planters, Gandhiji agreed to 25% refund. So, for writing this, for explaining it, we will say that before the commission of inquiry, Gandhiji placed clinching evidence, evidence that cannot be challenged, clinching evidence that the British landowners had fraudulently extorted compensation from the Indian indigo sharecroppers, knowing fully well that there was no need to grow indigo naturally when Germany had developed it synthetically at a very low rate. If indigo has been produced in the laboratory and the factories at a very cheaper rate, who will buy the natural product which is at very high rate? There will be no demand. So, but instead of waiving off the rent which they were charging at the rate of 15% of the produce of indigo, faced with such evidence, the British landowners agreed in principle to refund the peasants. Now, first victory of Gandhiji was that they made it known to them that they had done something wrong, and in principle they agreed to refund it. When the British landowners offered to pay 25%, the negotiations were going on, and first Gandhiji was adamant that 50%, adamant means that he was sticking to that only 50, he can agree to the refund of 50% only. But when during negotiations they offered 25%, Gandhiji agreed to it. Why? Gandhiji said that it was a moral victory for the farmers and signaled a loss of prestige for the Britishers who were otherwise thought of as unchallengeable. They were thought of, Indians were afraid of the Britishers, they dreaded them. Now the farmers realized that they had rights and that there were people who would defend their rights. got courage. So this we can polish it in whatever way, make it more beautiful. Okay. Now we come to the next question. How did Champaran episode change the plight of the peasants? The Indigo sharecroppers tasted their first victory when Gandhiji got them 25% refund from the British landowners. The peasants realized that they had rights and defenders. They learned courage. Gandhiji acted as a catalyst in transforming the lives of the poor and exploited. So, how the plight of the peasants was changed? Next question comes. Now the question arises, why do you think Gandhiji considered the Champaran episode to be a turning point in his life? Now, first of all, we have to understand that he had a methodology. And that methodology is known as his activism. Gandhiji's activism was service to mankind. He said that his loyalty was to the living human beings. His loyalty was not to abstractions like liberty, fraternity, equality. These are abstractions. But his main focus was the service to mankind. At Champaran, he succeeded in it when Britishers were compelled to drop the case against him and established that civil disobedience movement could take root in India. He had defied the orders not to leave Champaran. He was summoned before the court and tried before the magistrate, where when he pleaded guilty, the court saw that there was a mass upsurge, mass unrest, because people had thronged, people had girded the court, and the court wanted to postpone the proceedings. But Gandhiji was adamant. He said that when I have pleaded guilty, pass sentence on me. And the magistrate dilly-dallied and said that he will deliver it after 2 hours, and then he said that he can deliver only after a few days, and that Gandhiji was free till then. In the meanwhile, a message came from Lieutenant Governor that the case had been dropped. That was the first victory. He said that civil disobedience movement could take root in India. This is the first experiment that he did, and he succeeded in it. Secondly, the Champaran episode also brought home that Britishers were not unchallengeable, and that if the Indians were morally upright, the British had to bow down. They had to bow down. This episode convinced Gandhiji that the British could be urged to leave the country. He was convinced. It this the Gandhiji realized it in 1917. Okay. Now this is the chapter Indigo, where we have learned how the resolution of a poor peasant changed the whole history of India. Gandhiji, who had planned to stay at Champaran for a few days to solve his problem, stayed there for months on end. That's not all. He saw the ground realities of how the Indian peasants were living, how they were being maltreated by the Britishers. All this was a first-hand knowledge for any leader. So, I hope you will be able to do justice now to this chapter. Thank you.